It sounds like I'm living with a pack of elephants. This is insane. It's insanity here. Since my oldest son's 9th birthday is getting ready to come up, I thought I would do a quick little story time of his birth and how he was born while his father was deployed. Before I get into the story time, don't forget to subscribe to my channel down below. A little backstory. I got married before I graduated high school. A couple weeks before I graduated high school, Troy graduated from basic training and we got married that weekend when I went down to see him graduate. And then after that, we had an actual wedding. So we had 2 weddings. And, our friends and family came and we celebrated. Then he got stationed in Washington State and we moved from Pennsylvania to Washington. Now, this was in 2011. And within weeks, maybe a month, we found out we were pregnant. We were super excited. Our friends that we had met there were super excited for us. And shortly after being in Washington for maybe 2-3 months, we found out that Troy was deploying to Afghanistan, and I was devastated and shocked. Now I know how the military operates, where you never know what you're gonna get, but that was my first, oh shit, what? He's deploying to Afghanistan and I'm pregnant with our first baby, and I'm like, wait, what? So he leaves at the end of the year. So he leaves for Afghanistan December 2011. I was due March 14th of 2012. Here I am, 19, newly married, first baby, don't know what's going on. Husband's deploying. So he deploys, I move back home with my mom because I'm not gonna stay in Washington State where I only know 3 people. March rolls around. Troy has it all set up where he's coming home a few days before my due date. He didn't tell me, he was gonna surprise me. My mom was in on it. Everybody was all excited. He had this all planned out. He was gonna take his R&R right when a couple days before my due date he would arrive. They were gonna surprise me. It was gonna be great. All of it sounds fantastic, except my son was like, no, we're gonna come early. I'm gonna be born early. I remember it was a Friday. I woke up and I'm like, Mom, what do contractions feel like? And she's like, why? Are you having them? And I'm like, well, I don't know. What do they feel like? So she takes me to work with her that day and she's like, don't tell anybody that you think you're in labor. And I'm like, okay. So we go into her work and every single person that we pass, she's like, guess what? She thinks she's in labor. And I'm just freaking out because how am I going to get my husband home from Afghanistan if I'm in labor and I'm about to have this baby? He's not going to make it. And I remember crying, and I was in the bathtub, out the bathtub, I'm like, this isn't real, this can't be happening. And my mom's finally like, there's nothing you can do to prevent this. It's going to happen whether you're here at home or not. So let's just go to the hospital and see what's going on. So we go to the hospital that Friday night and they're like, you're in pre-labor, because they're like, we'll check you, we'll wait a while, we'll check you again. I was only at a 3. They don't admit you when you're under 4 or something of that nature. So they're like, go home, take a nap. It could be days, it could be a week, it could be tomorrow. We don't know. I'm like, okay, I have to get my husband here because I'm not having this baby without him. So I'm like, call the Red Cross and let them know, because that's the steps you have to take. And they're like, are you sure you want us to call the Red Cross? Because it could be another week before your baby is born. Me and my mom discussed it for a while and then we decided yes, just call the Red Cross and get him, on his way back as soon as possible. They're like, okay, we're gonna discharge you, come back if this happens, this happens, this happens. I'm like, okay, cool. They're like, we're gonna give you something to help with the contractions. What they gave me was Ambien. I had to swallow it, they gave it to me. They gave me the pill. I had to swallow it in front of the nurse. And I don't remember leaving the hospital. That's how bad it was. My body doesn't do well with drugs, doesn't do well with medication, and I don't remember leaving the hospital. I don't remember how I got home. I remember crawling up the stairs And I remember trying to reach out to Troy, and I remember crying because I couldn't see straight. I couldn't see my phone. So I'm bawling my eyes out, asking my mom to help me. And then like I remember vomiting because again, my body doesn't do well with medication. It was ridiculous. I could not believe that that's what they gave me. Like, I think I almost died that day. I have blacked out moments from that night that I just don't remember. So my contractions never stopped after that. I woke up the next day, I was still having contractions. I remember I was in the tub, out of the tub, walking around, crying. I didn't want to do this without my husband. He did end up on his way, but I didn't know how quickly he could get here. My mom's like, okay, we gotta go back to the hospital because I can tell that you're in a lot of pain. So we go back to the hospital. I'm 4 centimeters now, and they admit me. Consistent contractions, and just, I thought I was dying. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is it. This is how life ends. This hurts so bad, and I'm barely at the start. Like, how am I gonna get through this? So I asked for the epidural. I'm like, give it to me ASAP, as soon as possible. Hurry up, help me. I'm dying. I need it now. And I remember they made everybody get out of the room. It was just me and the nurse and the anesthesiologist. Then the nurse left, and it was just me and the anesthesiologist. And he's got this long needle in my back, and he's like, it's just gonna feel like a bee sting, and then you're gonna go numb. It's gonna be fine. As he's doing it, I can feel my water break. And I'm like, so do I just tell this random man that I think my water just broke? Or do I wait for the nurse to come back in? So I wait for the nurse to come back in. You know, now I'm all like, they got me like laid down and comfortable, and the epidural setting in, and I'm like, oh hey, by the way, I'm pretty sure my water broke. And she's like, yeah, sure. She just completely dismisses me. I'm like, okay, either my water broke or I peed my pants, because I know something happened. Fast forward, you know, everybody's there. People are eating in front of me. I'm like, this is so rude. Like, I'm starving, y'all are eating. The nurse comes in and I'm taking a nap. Zayden's heart rate was like spiking and dropping, and it was like pure chaos. Alarms are sounding. They're like, everybody get out, this baby is coming right now, we don't know what's going on. Like, my dad's freaking out, my brothers are freaking out, everybody's freaking out, my husband's still not here, I'm freaking out. I'm like, what's going on? Troy, come, where are you? The reason why his heart rate was dipping and alarms were sounding was because his umbilical cord was wrapped around his neck a few times. When he was coming down the birth canal, that was causing distress. My mom and Troy's brother Ryan were both in the room for Zayden's birth because Troy, of course, didn't make it on time. So Zayden was born in like 3 pushes, super tiny baby. I had no clue what I was doing, couldn't feel anything. They were coaching me. I had to get a couple stitches. He was 6 pounds, 3 ounces. He was so tiny. He was so small. And I remember calling Troy. He had landed in JFK, so I was able to call him while I was getting stitches, and I'm like, oh my gosh, you should see him, like, he's so small and he's so cute, like, get here. This is the drugs talking. Zayden was born Sunday morning. All of this started on Friday. He was born Sunday morning. Troy missed his birth by probably like 12 hours. He got right off the plane. Somebody went and picked him up and brought him straight to the hospital. They surprised me. I didn't know he was coming, and I like started bawling my eyes out. I'm like, where were you? Look at our precious baby. Like, I'm so happy you're here now. Thank the Lord. His brother Ryan actually made this like really nice video for Zayden. He had this little camcorder and he took like shots, and then he pieced it all together with some nice music. And if you want a good cry, go ahead and watch that, because it's definitely gonna make you cry. So he came and he surprised me, and I immediately started breaking down crying. I hadn't seen him since December, other than like spotty like Skype calls. I was so happy to see him, and he got to, you know, use his R&R, so he stayed with us for the first 2 weeks of Zayden's life. He helped me transition into being a new mom. Everything went really smooth. It was actually a really good birth experience, minus them drugging me with Ambien on that Friday night. 3 days after Zayden was born, we're at home now, and I'm like dying of a fever. I was super sick, cold, chills, and they're like, okay, let's get an appointment with your OBs. I go in and my chest is like the color of my hoodie. And she's like, does that hurt you? And I'm like, no. I mean, I didn't know anything about breastfeeding then. I was just trying to breastfeed. And she's like, you have mastitis. I can just tell by looking at you. And I'm like, okay, what's mastitis? And she's like, that's an infection in the milk ducts. So she prescribes me an antibiotic. I take it, I feel better. But I was like, okay, my husband just got home from deployment. He's getting ready to leave me. I had a fever and I could barely function for a few days. I'm done with this breastfeeding stuff. So I gave up breastfeeding because I was like, okay, this is just too much and I cannot handle it. That was, my mental health was more important than that because formula is a great option. So then the 2 weeks came and Troy went back to Afghanistan, and it was one of the saddest, most heartbreaking days of my life. We took him to the airport and I just remember him like holding little tiny Zayden, and there's this picture like ingrained in my brain of like little tiny Zayden on Troy's chest at the airport. He lived the first 8 months of his life with me at my mom's house. It was the longest 8 months of my life trying to navigate being a new mom. I was so thankful to have my mom there to help me and to live with her. It was kind of like Zayden had 2 moms. It was awesome. So he came back home in November when Zayden was 8 months. Zayden wasn't so sure about him. Zayden didn't really know him. It was also kind of heartbreaking, but of course he warmed up to him pretty quickly. And that's when I learned that with the Army, you just never know what you're gonna get. So that was my teenage pregnancy, first year of marriage experience. We made it through it somehow, some way. It definitely shaped me and helped me become a better mom, a better parent. So it was actually one of my best births, minus the fact that my husband wasn't there and I really wish he was. But it was overall a really good birthing experience. And that is how I set off the last 10 years of my life. We're coming up on our 10-year anniversary of marriage. We've lived in multiple different states. We have 5 sons, and that was the beginning of our story right there. It was a wild ride, and it's only gotten wilder since. If you enjoyed this story time, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.